All right, let's get to our top story this morning as I bring in senior meteorologist Scott Withers. We're talking about Helene, Scott, and what an impact this has left. Just getting to some of the details we have at this hour, that 130 people have died across 6 states. That number is expected to climb. As we look at this video, 56 of those deaths in North Carolina. Asheville, truly the hardest hit area at this point. Around that area, we have rescue missions that are ongoing. Hundreds of roads are closed, and there's limited internet and cell service. And of course, that area is still dealing with widespread power outages. So Scotty, what are we looking at going forward here from the weather department?
It's devastating to see that. I've been there so many times. It's so beautiful.
Place.
Absolutely beautiful. And you know, here's the good news, Chris. I mean, you've got the 70s all the way up here across. That's the summer, the fall really starting to kick in there. That's actually good. You're going to enjoy that. But then when you get down to, well, we can't make it go there. Yeah, we've got all of these little flooding areas still active. And this is 36 million people out there, Chris.
I mean, it's October 1st. It's 110
1st.
in Phoenix.
And it's going to be a record today and again tomorrow. This shouldn't be happening. So it feels like we're talking like June or July. It's October. I had to check the calendar all day.
Yeah, a lot to follow. Obviously, with that flooding, we'll continue to keep a close eye on. Meteorologist Scott Withers for us. Scotty, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, developing this morning, U.S. dock workers have hit the picket line. Nearly 45,000 union members across the East and Gulf Coasts are on strike after failed contract negotiations. The strike is expected to have a big impact on the economy. National correspondent Jamal Andrus joins us now live with the latest. Jamal, this is the first strike in almost 50 years.
Yeah, Chris, this is an extraordinarily large morale seems to be high amongst these folks that are demanding a higher wage moving into the new year.
Yeah, a lot of passion in the people surrounding you there, Jamal, and you think of all the items that come through those ports that will be impacted by this strike if it continues on. National correspondent Jamal Andrus for us live in Texas. Jamal, thank you. And joining us now is someone who could experience the effects of this strike firsthand. Tom Maioli is the owner of Celebrity Motorcar Company, which has 6 dealership locations in New Jersey. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. In the car business, how are you anticipating this strike to have an impact on your business?
Listen, you know, we got crushed in COVID.
How much do you expect car prices to go up at your locations? All right, we're going to work on getting Tom back. We're having a little bit of issues with the connection with him, but this is a major story to watch. Jamal was talking about $7.5 billion a day that this strike could have an impact on the economy. We do have Tom back with us. Tom, specifically, how much are you anticipating this strike could increase prices by at your dealerships?
You know, listening of this whole thing was very interesting. You know, we're coming into an election in a couple months, and I think that, you know, the labor unions waited. They were strategic in waiting to make sure that the White House couldn't step in because they don't want to lose that union vote. So I think, you know, we're in a tough time right now.
Yeah, certainly politics at play with this, but the prices as well on so many goods. Tom Maioli for us, thank you. Best of luck as this strike continues on.
Thank you.
All right, still ahead, the vice presidential showdown is tonight, and this is possibly the last debate before the November election. What could come up on this stage? Plus, former President Jimmy Carter, and think about it, he's lived through a Great Depression, a World War, technological revolutions, and 4 years in the White House. Ahead on Morning Rush, the former president turns 100. Turn to the campaign trail where both J.D. Vance and Tim Walz will meet tonight on the debate stage. This is the only scheduled vice presidential debate before the November election. To preview the event, we're joined by Deputy Political Director Joe St. George. Joe, traditionally, many will say the VP debate does not have a huge impact on the outcome of the presidential race, but what impact could this debate have?
Well, let's between now and Election Day, Chris.
Yeah, it's getting close. There's always those viral moments too, Joe. I remember the fly that landed on Mike Pence's head last time around. What will tonight have in store? We'll see. Deputy Political Director Joe St. George, live from Washington. Joe, thank you. And you can watch the vice presidential debate right here on Scripps News tonight. We'll be simulcasting the event at 9 p.m. Eastern. Today is former President Jimmy Carter's 100th birthday. Already the longest living president in U.S. history. He is the first to reach the century mark, and correspondent Julie Martin joins us here in Atlanta for Carter's big day. Of course, he's in Plains, a couple hours away from where we are right now. It's incredible he made this milestone considering he's been in hospice since last year.
Yeah, he's motivated. Family members, Carter's birthday wish is to vote in this presidential election. He seems very motivated to do so.
Very much so. Just an incredible life story,
really,
too, when you think of Jimmy Carter and Rosalind Carter, and it's incredible.
And all of the historical events they've
all the historical events. Think of 100 years, what you see. Yeah, correspondent Julie Martin for us live here in Atlanta. Julie, thank you. Well, a major player in the TV industry is buying its main rival, but the sale price for the company is just $1. We'll explain why next. Welcome back to Morning Rush. I'm Chris Stewart. More than 1.5 million customers from Florida to West Virginia are still without power 4 days after Helene hit the southeast. The death toll has risen to more than 130 people, and that number is expected to climb. At least 25 people died in Georgia. On Monday, Governor Brian Kemp authorized 1,000 additional Georgia National Guard members to help respond to the damage in the state. North Carolina is dealing with widespread destruction. In Asheville, the destruction is being described by some as biblical. People there are stranded. Still, many do not have power. There's limited cell phone service. The mayor says as many as 600 people remain unaccounted for. Hundreds of thousands of people in North Carolina are still in the thick of the devastation. We spoke to one resident earlier about the challenges the city of Asheville is facing.
People are seeking refuge everywhere. They are trying to find they're just trying to find food and water. They're trying to find, a lot of people are trying to find a way out. They're trying to get out right now. And there's a lot of people trying to come in at the same time, trying to find family members that they can't find right now. But Asheville, if it ain't gone, it's pretty much destroyed.
We have team coverage this morning. Health and science correspondent Lindsay Thies is looking at the health impacts and trauma from this storm. And national correspondent Dan Grossman is on the ground in Asheville. Dan, we know so far at least 40 people have died in Asheville's county alone. Many of the roads still underwater. What are you seeing this morning as you take it in for yourself?
Persons report list. So, Chris, as you mentioned, that death toll only expected to rise in this tragic situation.
Yeah, just a staggering number. National correspondent Dan Grossman for us on the ground in Asheville, North Carolina. Dan, thank you. I now want to turn to health and science correspondent Lindsay Thies. Lindsay, you have Tennessee, Florida, Georgia, as well as the Carolinas. They have all declared public health emergencies. But as we see some of the conditions that Dan has been showing us and we hear about the stories that people are dealing with, what are the health risks right now that you're seeing that this disaster poses?
Well, are impacted.
Yeah, it's so important to note that the recovery in many ways is just beginning. Health and science correspondent Lindsay Thies for us. Lindsay, thank you. Scripps News has launched a disaster relief campaign to help the many victims of Helene. To help those impacted by this storm, you can scan the QR code that's on your screen right now. This will take you to our website with information about how to donate, or you can text Helene to 50155. Every dollar donated goes directly to those impacted by Helene. The Scripps Howard Fund will match every dollar donated up to $10,000 to support relief efforts. Georgia's Attorney General promises to appeal a court ruling that struck down the state's ban on most abortions. State judge in Atlanta ruled yesterday the state can no longer enforce a law that prohibits abortion after about the 6th week of pregnancy. The judge ruled the law was unconstitutional when it was enacted before the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. The ruling means women in Georgia can obtain abortions until the point of fetal viability. That's about the 22nd week of pregnancy. The Justice Department says it will review one of the worst instances of racist violence in American history. At least 300 black people were killed and thousands were forced into internment camps in the Tulsa race riots of 1921. A white mob burned homes, businesses, schools, and churches in Tulsa's thriving Greenwood district. It was then known as Black Wall Street. Officials say it's unlikely any living person could be prosecuted in connection to this massacre, but descendants of the victims welcome the probe as a means for long-delayed justice. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is speaking publicly for the first time about his years of incarceration. He maintains he did nothing wrong and was acting as a journalist when he obtained and published U.S. military secrets. Assange was released in June after pleading guilty to a charge of espionage. He was given credit for more than 5 years served behind bars in the United Kingdom. Critics say his actions put U.S. national security and innocent lives at risk and went far beyond the bounds of journalism. Still ahead, he was one of the greatest to ever play the game of baseball, but he was also a controversial figure, banned from the sport that he loves so much. We'll take a look back at the remarkable career and life of Pete Rose, who passed away at the age of 83. Plus, a new documentary about hip-hop explores an often neglected part of the musical genre's history, its ties to the South. That's ahead on Morning Rush. He holds several records, but the most significant, his 4,256 hits. That is the most of anyone who ever played the game. National sports correspondent Paul Crane is here. Controversial figure, though, was banned from the sport for betting on baseball, which is certainly a headline as well when you think of Pete Rose.
As a manager after his playing days.
For sure. How should we remember Pete Rose?
Well, one of the greatest players of all time,
Yeah.
but as you mentioned, his legacy is a complicated one. He owns several records that will likely never be broken, including that all-time hit record. But he spoiled his incredible playing. It'll be interesting to see what, if anything, Major League Baseball does to recognize its all-time hits king. And Chris, of course, ultimately, will it ever recognize him in the Hall of Fame?
I
That's
have
what
to
he
say,
wanted.
I love a player who plays with their hair on fire, and no one did it more.
None.
No one did it more than Pete Rose. As we look at sports betting, Paul, and it's more normalized now, we're seeing it legal in many states. Certainly wasn't legal when Pete Rose did it, but how could that impact the way we view Pete Rose and what he was accused of doing?
Well, I think clearly the game and sports gambling,
Right.
It's now a source of revenue. Players and managers still cannot bet, but posthumously, now that he's no longer here.
Yeah, eventually one day. What a life, though. What a career. National sports correspondent Paul Crane. Thanks for the perspective, Paul. We appreciate it. Stay here on Scripps News. We have more Morning Rush next.
Taping on nobody want to hear it, but it's like this. The South got something to say. That's all I got to say.
2023 marked 50 years since the birth of hip-hop in 1973. A powerful documentary examines the impact the South has had on the music and how it hasn't always gotten the credit it deserves. That was Atlanta rapper Andre 3000 making a now iconic statement at the 1995 Source Awards. As seen in the documentary, it was produced by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and it has been recognized as a finalist in the Scripps Howard Awards for Journalistic Excellence. The awards are sponsored by our parent company, EW Scripps, and one of the journalists involved is Ryan Horn, and he joins us now for more. Thanks for taking the time to be with us. What did you want people to take away from this documentary?
I think the biggest, thank you for having me, first off, but I think searched for was to find out why a place like Atlanta could be such an impact in the world and through music and through hip hop music. And I think we did that, and when you think about all the artists like Outkast or go before then, like Jermaine Dupri and Dallas Austin and even Mojo, you see that a lot of these artists derived from a community-based relationships, and the soul that was in them allowed them to be as creative as possible. That was brand new to the world, and I think that's what we really achieved to show that Atlanta is not just a place of music, but it's a place of culture and art and business and all these aspirations. So people could watch this film and really get a good perception of what the soul of Atlanta is.
How would you characterize the style of Atlanta hip hop compared to some of the artists we've seen from New York, like the Notorious B.I.G., or of course in Los Angeles, where you have people like Tupac?
Yeah, and it's funny when you have in '95 during the Source Awards where Outkast and Andre 3000 says that profound sentence that the South got something to say. These were some boys from the South, and they came out of nowhere with their country draw and their Southern draw. And I think what it is, the difference between hip hop in the South and everywhere else is, again, going back to that soul, that gospel. In our film, we talk about pulling that gospel that really is found in the music, the sampling that they use, and it's just something in there that really touches everyone's soul throughout the world.
And I know a big part of this documentary, too, is the argument that Atlanta doesn't get the credit it deserves when it comes to, how would you characterize the style of Atlanta hip hop compared to some of the artists we've seen from New York, like the Notorious B.I.G., or of course in Los Angeles, where you have people like Tupac? And I know a big part of this documentary, too, is the argument that Atlanta doesn't get the credit it deserves when it comes to the development of hip-hop and the spread of hip-hop in the United States. Why do you think that is?
In the South, more than anywhere else.
We just have about 30 seconds left, but when you listen to hip-hop from Atlanta today, you think of an artist like Future, you think of 2 Chainz. Compare that to Outkast, Jermaine Dupri in the past. How do they differ?
3 Grammys,
yeah,
and having Rico Wade on the beginning of his album. So it's really, those connections are still there regardless of anything.
Ryan Horn with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It's an incredible documentary. Congratulations on the nomination. Thanks for being here. And thanks for joining us
so much.
on The Scenes Next.